Thank you so much for that introduction, and it's really an honor to be part of this economic update launch. My presentation is going to focus on the special topic of the report, and this is on investing in climate-smart agriculture and sustainable land management for a green, resilient economic growth, food security, and poverty reduction. Uganda is a country that is highly dependent on its natural resources. Agricultural land, both pasture land and croplands, forests, wetlands, water bodies, and soils. All of these resources form the foundation of economic activity that includes industry and agriculture. 80% of the country's households are dependent on natural resources for their livelihoods. As one can imagine, there are tremendous pressures on and rapid depletion of the natural resource base that is caused by different factors, both human and natural. Population growth, urbanization, conversion of land for farming, the country's topography, even the drive for industrialization for economic growth are all factors that come into play. Renewable resources are being depleted at a much faster pace than they are being renewed, whether we're talking about forests, wetlands, or even the land itself. The country is paying a high price for us. Poor management of natural resources does come at a cost. Between 1990 and 2015, forest cover loss amounted to about $1.2 billion worth of economic losses. Wetland degradation can also lead to losses of around $200 per capita for goods and services. Losses resulting from soil nutrients as a result of erosion cost the country about $625 million back in 2003. Clearly, the costs are substantive, but even more so for a low-income country. While natural resource degradation can impact poverty and people directly, agriculture sector's size and contribution to livelihoods and the economy make it a dominant pathway by which natural resource degradation can have an impact on livelihoods as well as the economy. I think it's also equally concerning that the agriculture sector does contribute to natural resource degradation. Environmental degradation can cost up to 27% of agriculture GDP in terms of losses. Soil erosion's impact on maize productivity has been estimated in some places to be as high as 190 kgs per hectare, and this has implications for food security. Uganda's total factor productivity, which is a measure of productivity that accounts for land, capital, labor, and other resources that are employed in production, has been on a consistent decline since 2005 and is the lowest in the East African region. Agriculture contributes to 80% of land degradation, mainly through soil erosion and nutrient loss. In 2019, it was estimated that the cost of soil erosion and land degradation was about 17% of the country's GDP. The negative relationship between agriculture and natural resource degradation is further aggravated by climatic risks, both that are slow in onset as well as extreme events. And this also has impacts on poverty as well as the economy. Between 2016 and 2018, the rise in poverty rates in the country were primarily concentrated in subnational regions with high levels of natural resource degradation. The cost implications are huge. The cost of climate change inaction could cost the country between 2 to 4% of GDP annually in agriculture, water, energy, and infrastructure sectors. And this is the equivalent of between $7 to $11 billion annually over a 40-year period. It is also predicted that crop production for commodities like cassava, sweet potato, and potato are expected to decline by as much as 40% by 2050. Prospects for economic growth, poverty reduction, and improved livelihoods have to be anchored in ensuring that we address natural resource degradation, we build resilience through climate change, and we improve agricultural productivity in a very sustainable manner. It is clear that we cannot continue to engage in business as usual. What it will take is a fundamental shift. In other words, whatever interventions are promoted should be expected to achieve not only social and economic benefits or outcomes, but they should also achieve sustainable environment as well as natural resource management benefits and outcomes. Scaling up sustainable land management and climate-smart agriculture can help to achieve these multiple outcomes. However, adoption of sustainable land management and CSA practices has been quite low due to a number of factors. There are a number of sustainable land management and climate-smart agriculture practices that have been piloted and demonstrated, but scaling up has been limited. And these have ranged from croplands, rangelands, forests, as well as water systems. There are barriers to scaling up sustainable land management as well as climate-smart agriculture technologies. And these barriers can range from institutional, structural, social, as well as financial barriers. In terms of institutional barriers, there are gaps in institutional arrangements, capacities to actually implement these technologies or uptake of these technologies, as well as coordination challenges amongst the different entities that are mandated to facilitate the uptake of these technologies. The uncertainty around land rights and poor access to markets can often create disincentives for communities, particularly smallholder farmers, to actually adopt and sustain these climate-smart agriculture technologies as well as sustainable land management practices. Poor access to appropriate technologies and the knowledge of how to actually put these into practice is another challenge that most communities face. Social factors, behavioral characteristics, and norms are those things that prevent communities from taking that next step and changing their behaviors to adopt new technologies and wanting to stay with the old way of doing things, which may be less productive. And then there's the financial side to it. There is a high cost involved in adoption of these technologies, and the funding that goes with it is pretty low or is unavailable for communities to actually take it up. So what can be done? There is a need to increase public investments through budgetary support, as well as to provide appropriate incentives for the uptake of sustainable land management and climate-smart agriculture technologies. There is a need to increase access to data and to knowledge, as well as to deepen the stakeholder engagement for policy as well as behavioral change. And this stakeholder engagement has to be at all levels, right from the national, right down to the community level. There is a need to promote location-specific complementary technologies that focus on multiple objectives. And by doing that, the potential gains that you would get from addressing multiple objectives would be far greater than what you would gain if you were to only focus on a single one. And finally, there is a need to streamline policies and institutions for consistency, for comprehensiveness, and effectiveness across all levels of governance. These are some of the strategies and recommendations that are made in the report. I would like to thank you all for listening to the presentation. And now I'd like to hand back to the moderator, but I will remain online to answer any questions you may have, as well as provide clarifications. Thank you once again.